Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, the show where aspiring and experienced matchmakers come to sharpen their skills, grow their businesses, and elevate the matchmaking industry. Your host is Arlene Washburn, an award-winning ethical matchmaking advocate, mentor, and industry innovator. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast, where aspiring and experienced matchmakers, along with their clients, come for insights into love, lifestyle, psychology, and business. And I'm your host, Arlene Washburn, ethical matchmaking advocate and mentor. And today I am thrilled to be joined by one of my favorite matchmakers in the whole wide world. He is a true expert in psychology and the psychology of interpersonal relationships. Brandan Rader, who's been in the business for over 10 years, has coached thousands of people through their dating and relationship journeys. He's also the author of the Love Attraction Journal, a tool designed to help individuals align their mindset and actions to attract meaningful love. We're going to dive into a topic that every matchmaker and dating professional needs to master: how to coach your clients through the matchmaking process. From managing expectations to handling rejection to helping clients open up to be really authentic and in partnership with you, we'll explore how psychology can elevate results in matchmaking. And let me tell you, Brandan is one of the best people I know to provide frameworks that are easily, something that you can put into place. And so I can't wait for this conversation. Welcome, Brandan.
Thank you for having me, Arlene. It's a pleasure, and as always, you're very generous with your praise and your compliments.
Well, it's true.
And again, I'm very glad to be here and to be talking about discussing this topic with you. One of the things that resonates with me that you always say is that the first match happens with your matchmaker. And so I think that is paramount in creating a conducive relationship to helping your clients through the matchmaking journey.
It's such a great point, and definitely we need to start there. You have to partner with your matchmaker, but also the matchmaker has to be really good at gaining that trust and credibility with their client. It's not just liking them, but also being able to guide you through, because often I believe what happens with matchmaking is that the folks that might go to a matchmaker often require a little coaching, but they don't want to hear that. They don't want to know about coaching. They want you to find them a fish, give them a fish. You don't want to. They don't want to. They don't want to be taught how to fish. They want you to find the fish, give it up, and put it on a silver platter. And coaching is such an important component of matchmaking. So, what would you say is the best way to go into that without being off-putting to your client who's really not, quote unquote, looking for coaching?
So, in all of my memberships, I have listed in what they get is feedback coaching. And so, when I'm describing what the membership features include, I discuss what is feedback coaching. Now, some people don't want to do the deep dives and they don't want to do the pre work that's necessary to really prime themselves for their ideal partner and their ideal relationship because they don't think that they need it. They think that they just need to be put in front of their ideal person and then the magic will happen. And so if they're telling me that they're ready, I will say, you know what? If you're telling me you're ready at this point, I don't know any better because I don't know you yet. I haven't worked with you yet. And all I have is based off of what you've shared with me. And so if you feel like that's the missing piece, then we will address that piece. However, we also include this feedback coaching because after every first date, we'll get feedback to find out how everything went. We'll be collecting data along your journey. And if any barriers or issues arise, then we can address it at that time. So just letting them know that this is something that's incorporated in the membership. And at some point, if something's not aligning, we will be addressing it.
I think that's wonderful. I mean, essentially what I'm hearing is that you take clients who are coachable, that they know up front that this is part of the process, because it's really like a waste of time if someone really needs the coaching and they could be super uber successful and be doing great at everything else in their life. But if this area is a bit of a challenge for them. Maybe they've developed certain habits, or they're not self-aware, etc., that it's important to hear it from someone who can actually be forthcoming, caring, and on your side, rooting you on, but giving you information that you do need that you may not get from dating on your own in the wild, because people don't usually tell you what the problem is. They'll just be, it's not you, it's me.
Absolutely. People love to make up excuses or to ghost because they're conflict avoidant. I've
Yeah.
heard from my own clients that when they don't want to see someone again or they want to end a courtship, they ask me to end it for them and to make up an excuse. And I'm like, no, I'm like, you're going to end it with them. And let's talk about how you can frame your message to them in a way that is positive, but also still constructive. Because this is one of the biggest problems in the dating world is that people are not getting that constructive feedback. So most people don't even understand why it's not working for them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you have a really strong background as a psychological researcher, mediator. You've been around the realm of coaching and understanding, human interactions and relationships. But what would you say to someone who, let's say, has gone through some sort of training for matchmaking, becomes a matchmaker, but they have no background in coaching, and now they have a client who you can tell they really need the support. Like, what do you say to these people? Because I've always been a firm believer that if you're a matchmaker, you definitely should learn how to coach on dating and relationships, which are two very different things. Like, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, one, what I have found is that a lot of matchmakers assume that just because they are a matchmaker that they also are a dating coach, and that's not the case. It is important for them to receive training on how to coach someone, and also for prospective clients to understand that your matchmaker might not be trained as a coach. And there's a difference between receiving the data about someone and having information about dating and relationships in general because you've read books or through your own experience, and being able to then transform that into frameworks to guide the client on their journey in a strategic and productive way. It's the same concept as being a teacher, right? Not every expert in their field has the ability to teach other people what they do and what they know in a way where they can then learn that content in a strategic and productive way. Like it's a very specific skill set to be able to teach someone. And in fact, there's entire degrees on teaching people how to be teachers. And that's the same reason why there are degrees on teaching people how to be psychologists, or the curriculum on how to become a coach. Different skill sets. Knowledge does not equate to skill set.
100%. And I'll tell you, I think it's good for matchmakers to always have continuing education. And once you've mastered your matchmaking, which God knows we never master anything because we're always trying to get better and things are always changing. But considering learning about how to coach and what different areas of coaching, because you're going to hit these challenges. And what would you say to a matchmaker who is now dealing with a very upset client who is lashing out? And we know this, if you've been in matchmaking long enough, you know that there's a lot of heartache and disappointment that happens with clients, and they will turn it on you because you're the person listening to them. How do you navigate that to be able to support them and not put yourself in the mix? Because I think that's the one of the key components is taking yourself out of the equation, even though they're lashing out at you.
Right. Well, one simple approach is, well, the first thing a matchmaker needs to do is ask themselves, do I want to also be a coach? Now, that doesn't mean that they can't provide little tips and recommendations along the journey, but there's a difference between providing some general tips and recommendations to full coaching. And so a matchmaker should ask themselves, do I want to do both? And if so, then they need to receive training on it. A simple alternative is hire somebody who is a coach. I actually work as a coach as well for other matchmakers. and I have contracts with other matchmaking companies just doing coaching, because some matchmakers don't want to do the coaching. Even if they know how, they might not want to, because they have too many matchmaking clients. They just, have too many. They're not at capacity. They don't have the capacity to do both. Also, I think that it's important for matchmakers to understand that your clients might not be receptive to your coaching as a matchmaker, because they might perceive it as you trying to justify your matches to them,
Mm.
versus genuinely trying to coach the client into being in a relationship with someone that's going to last.
That is such a great point. And to some degree, I think it's often advisable to have a separate coach. Even if you're good at it, even if you do it yourself, it might be helpful in some instances to have that as a separate individual doing it versus you, because that's such a great point that they're going to think that you're just trying to get them to, accept the matches that you're providing or blame them. And, one thing that I loved about what you said is that if someone thinks that they don't need coaching, that you meet them where they are. You don't impose, you don't push it on them. You're like, okay, let's try that. And if it doesn't work, they themselves recognize, and I think that is the sign of a really good coach, is meeting people where they are and then getting them to recognize what their needs are. And yeah, there are some cases where people just need a match because they're too busy, they're running a company, they're running around, they're flying all over the place, they're great with, if they have a relationship but they just don't have the time to seek one, and they go to a matchmaker for that reason. Absolutely. And also, needing a little coaching doesn't make you wrong or that there's something wrong with you. It's just, you know, if you've been out of the game, if you've been married for 20 years and all of a sudden you're dating all over again, it's like a whole new world.
Well, one of the things I tell all of my clients is that when I was working for a couples counseling practice, what I realized was that most people were not taught how to date intentionally from a young age. For most of us, our primary caregivers don't sit us aside and ask us, who do you envision for your ideal partner? What do you envision for your ideal relationship dynamics? Are these things congruous, meaning do they even make sense together? And if so, how can you go about achieving these goals? They might do those for other things in our lives, like what extracurriculars do you want to participate in? What sports do you want to play? What university do you want to attend? What profession do you want to enter? But they don't do it for our relationships usually. So there's a lot of trial and error, oftentimes heavy on the error. And what I had realized was that a lot of people who ended up in couples counseling practice, it wasn't because they were bad people. It wasn't because they made necessarily the wrong choice. It's because they weren't taught the dating skills to date intentionally. And even if they did meet somebody who, let's say, could be a good long-term match, they weren't taught the interpersonal relationship skills to build and sustain long-term relationships. So I think everybody could benefit from coaching on interpersonal relationship skills.
And yeah, while we're talking about that, let's also make the distinction about, therapy versus coaching, because I feel that sometimes people look at having a coach as like almost like having a therapist, and they're distinctly different. So I would love for you to expand a little bit on that, so it's very clear to folks that they're totally different concepts and approaches, etc.
Yes, and on that same note, I've worked with a lot of clients who have told me that they've worked with a therapist. And so then that means that they are dating ready, they're relationship ready. But again, there's distinctions between coaching and counseling. And the biggest difference is that your therapist is going to give you tools to help you come to your own realizations, to help you better understand yourself, maybe to understand your history, to identify your strengths and weaknesses. But their job is not to teach you how to date. They don't give you a lot of real world application. They might give you tools on how to, let's say, manage your emotions, or how to regulate your emotions in stressful situations, how to cope with depression or other psychological disorders. But most of them are not allowed to tell you, okay, here is how you date. And here is all, there's also a code of ethics that prevents the matchmaker from really stepping into the lives of their clients and telling them what to do.
Mhm.
So I perceive coaching as the person who's able to cross that barrier. They're able to step more into the client's lives and actually guide them step by step on what to do. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't help them, give them the tools and resources to do things on their own. It just means that they can take things a step further and actually be in stride with the clients and help guide them on their journey.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And yeah, I look at the therapy more for trauma, because when I was a matchmaker, I had therapists that I can send people to if they were dealing with some trauma that really needed to be resolved, and I was more focused on now and in the future and trying to get them to their goals. And I think that's a huge distinction. I've also worked with a lot of clients who were therapists, as well as know a lot of therapists who have left the industry to become coaches because they felt like they had to go a little further and couldn't do that under the circumstances. So you talked about this really important topic of not learning how to date or be in relationships because it's not taught to you. And in fact, what you model often is not ideal for you to be successful. Let's give people some frameworks. I know you have a framework for everything, which is what I love about you. On First, let's talk about dating, because I really do want to impress the distinction between the dating is kind of how to get the guy, how to get the gal, and the being in a relationship is, dealing with how to resolve issues in a relationship. It's never too early to learn either one, and I think you should learn both, but they're different, right? It's kind of like the rom-com. It gets to the point where she got the guy or he got the gal, and then the movie ends and then the relationship starts. So let's jump into all your fabulous frameworks on dating, for example.
Well, first, I always like to clarify to clients that there is a difference between courtship skills and relationship skills, as you mentioned. Now, how I look at this is that we have a toolbox, a broad set of tools, which are social skills. And we use these tools or these social skills in different ways in different environments and settings. So, for example, we could use the same tool, let's say transparency. That tool of transparency is going to be used differently during the courtship. It's going to be used differently during the relationship. It's going to be used different in a professional relationship, platonically, familially. Different settings require a different use of the same tool. So just because someone is, let's say, excellent at being vulnerable and values being transparent doesn't mean that they know how to use that specific tool correctly in a specific settings. They might know how to use it in one, but perhaps not the other. So that's the first thing, is understanding that just because you might have good social skills, good interpersonal relationship skills in one arena doesn't mean that you are skilled at applying them in another arena. Let's talk like vulnerability, for example. I think that's a great one to use because a lot of people value vulnerability. They perceive it as authentic and being honest. But there's such thing as too much too soon during the courtship. However, being vulnerable in a relationship and just being raw and honest and open is really valuable. So if you're on a date in the courtship and somebody asks you about your childhood and maybe you had some childhood trauma, you don't unleash your whole childhood trauma being vulnerable on date one, because that person's probably going to run out the door. Check. um, Whereas in your relationship, it might be more beneficial than to share with your partner more about your history and your upbringing so that they have a better idea of how it might be impacting you in your current relationship, or just have a better understanding of who you are and an appreciation for who you are.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that basically, I think this is a topic that not a lot of people talk about. So I appreciate you bringing this up. This spectrum that exists from, the beginning of a relationship and the behavior that you bring out. And often people think that if they behave a certain way initially and they're not being their full self, that they're not being authentic, And it's like, no, it's almost like you speak, I speak multiple languages, for example. And if I'm talking to someone who I know doesn't understand English and I'm able to speak in their language, I'm going to do that. And I really think it's that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that modulation of bringing out the right tools at the right time, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I could see why people would need coaching in this instance, because I even see it with people who are professional, and sometimes they'll say things in a public forum that is just not appropriate because it kind of devaluates them. Not that you want to be on a pedestal, but you could only go so far if you want to maintain your level of professionalism, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yes, so that is there. It's such a nuance on how to
Mhm.
use these tools appropriately, and it makes the biggest difference. I always say dating is in the details, and it's something that I coach a lot of my clients on: is how and when to use these tools, and to what degree, given the stage of the courtship or the relationship.
Mhm. I love this. Wow, I can see how complicated dating can be for some people, especially if you come from a culture. Uh, One of our colleagues, Jasmina, always says, she comes from a culture that is like, don't date, because you got to become a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's like, get married, and you're like, wait a second, I never dated, I don't know the first thing about it. And I mean, she comes from a culture of arranged marriages. Not that she did that because she's in America and all that, but I can see where that almost might be necessary, because it's like you don't know what you're doing. All of a sudden, you're like, I have to start dating. I don't even know the first thing about it.
Right.
What are other areas for people to focus in on? I thought that was this huge point of knowing what to do, when to do it.
From a larger framework, I'm all about intentional dating. And
Mm,
it's a buzzword right now, like a buzz phrase, intentional dating. But really, intentional dating is as old as recorded human history, because intentional dating is really more like a formal courtship process, right? And so I define intentional dating as dating with the intention of achieving a specific romantic goal and having the tools, knowledge, and skill set to achieve that goal. And so when we look at like the Latin roots of the word dating, intentional, the Latin root of intentional, it means to reach for. And so when you're dating intentionally, you are literally dating to reach for a very specific goal. Now, the way that, particularly in the US, that people are dating is what I call incidental dating.
so true.
And the Latin root of the word incident means to fall. And so, what are people always trying to do? Fall in love.
Mm-hmm.
And so they expect it just to happen incidentally. It's the way it's portrayed in the movies, the rom-coms, the books. And people just believe, oh, I'm going to like bump into someone and fall in love. This idea of incidental dating. And I like the word incidental because I think that it perfectly encapsulates what people are doing when they're falling in love or trying to fall in love. Incident has a negative connotation. So whenever we say, oh, I was in an incident, there was a traffic incident, or I had an incident in the office today, it's something negative. Usually it's something undesirable that happens, which is usually what happens when people just fall in love. They usually fall into the wrong relationships. Now, I want to preface, or not preface, but add the stipulation that yes, sometimes people can fall in love and they can fall in love with the right person. However, I think that this is becoming less and less true, as what we're seeing is that divorce rates are still high, even though they've somewhat declined. However, it's important to keep in mind that one of the reasons why divorces are declining is also because less people are getting married.
Yes. And the cost of living. When the cost of living goes up, it's because there's a financial, gain in being married. Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, you gave me goosebump when you described everything you just said, because I thought that was so profound and so on point. And I love the distinction of those two words. What do you say to clients when they come to you with a shopping list of all the things that they need from someone? I mean, the fact that they even need to get from someone, because I feel like I look at relationships where you're not going there to get, you're going to give. And then if it's a mutual giving and not one is a taker, the other one's a giver, it turns out pretty good. But a lot of times I think people are wanting and getting, but anyway, their shopping list. What do you do when someone shows up with that?
Well, first, I'd like to say I think that's a beautiful concept, the idea of giving, what you have to give in a relationship. And it's actually a lesson that I learned in my relationship. So I'm, going on, I'm on, had my 15-year anniversary this year. So going on 16 years. And I remember about the third year in, I had this epiphany that I had never thought about what I have to give in a relationship. I always thought about what I wanted from a person and from a relationship. And I remember we were sitting down at dinner. I was sitting at dinner with my partner, and I said, what do you want from me and from a relationship, and what do you need? I've never asked you that, and I've never thought about like what I have to offer you or what I have to give you. And I've always approached this really selfishly because I've always been focusing on what you have to offer me and what you have to give me, but I've never really thought about what I have to give. And that was a big turning point in my relationship to creating a more healthy relationship dynamic.
I think that we're all, pretty much socialized to think that, because we're like, okay, well, I'm alone. I can give myself whatever I need, and therefore, if somebody is coming into my life, they need to add value. But I don't think that people realize the nuance of and the psychology behind when you give, when you do for people, when you volunteer, when anytime that you're giving, that actually oxytocin, dopamine, all that stuff starts to flow through your body. I don't think a lot of people realize that you by giving actually get a lot out of it. Um, and it's interesting because if you have two people that are on the same page about that, it could be very, very harmonious and very glorious. Not to say you're not going to have conflicts, but you're going into it in a different way versus just what can I get.
Right. Now, to the shopping list topic,
Mhm.
I do a lot of things with this. So first, I like to identify like whether there's contradictory dating criteria. And I define contradictory dating criteria as two things that are contradictory and are not likely to be found in one person. And I hear this a lot in dating. Like someone will say, I want someone who is really successful and ambitious and driven, but also like easygoing and has a flexible schedule and not super busy and has a lot of time for a relationship and for me. And I'm like, if they're really driven and ambitious and highly successful, they're going to be really focused on their career. They're going to be focused on their business. They're not going to be easygoing. They're probably going to be goal oriented, which sometimes you can have someone who's a little bit more easygoing, but usually goal oriented people are focused on what needs to get done and how to do it and how to do it in the most efficient way so that they can meet their goals. So that's oftentimes contradictory dating criteria. And so I like to highlight to people that this is contradictory dating criteria, and that when you have this, you're setting yourself up for disappointment and failure. And so you need to be more realistic about what you're looking for and think about what is actually going to be good for you, which is the next step. I recommend that people eliminate what I call specificities of the person. Must be 6 feet tall, must be a certain body size, certain hair color, certain ethnicity, the specifics of the person, even to a certain degree, just random personality traits. Like people throw out arbitrary personality traits, ambitious, driven, funny, humorous, witty, you just throw out all these things. And I'm like, have you actually thought about how these show up in a relationship and how you envision them showing up in your relationship? Most people don't. And so I tell them what you should be focusing on are qualities that a person needs to possess to create your ideal relationship dynamic. So I then tell them, like, what I want you to do is create a day, week, month, year in the life of with this person. I want to, and be specific, and paint a picture for both of us as to what your ideal relationship dynamic looks like. So if someone tells me a day in the life of, it could be something as simple as, we wake up in the morning without alarms, and we wake late, sit in bed and talk about what our plans are for the day. And then we both go to the gym, and then we meet back up for lunch, and then we go to for a stroll in the park, and we stop at this cute cafe. So what this tells me is they want somebody who is more easygoing, who's not super routine oriented. Because if somebody's more routine oriented, they're going to be waking up at the same time, usually with or without an alarm. They're not just going to leisurely sit in bed. They're going to get up, go to the gym at the same time. They're going to have their day mapped out regardless. And if you have a date scheduled with someone, they're going to have that mapped out too. They're going to be like, all right, what are we doing today? Let's get it all planned. Let's make sure we have reservations. It's not just let's go through for a walk in the park and see if we find something. So this starts to paint a picture of the types of qualities that a person really needs to possess to create their ideal relationship dynamic, which may be very different. So somebody says instead, we wake up at the same time, we get some work done, we go to the gym, we meet at lunch, and then we go to this restaurant that we have reservations at that we've both been dying to try and talking about for months. Okay, that tells me that person's routine oriented, they're a planner, they're organized, they're fitness oriented because they're going to the gym even on their day off. And so again, this paints a picture for the types of qualities they should be looking for in a partner, not just fun and humorous and playful and loving and loyal. And I'm like, do these things actually equate to the type of relationship dynamic you want? If not, let's eliminate them.
I think the apps have really killed a lot of innate qualities that humans had before apps. And I don't want to be a hypocrite because I met my husband online 15 years ago, but I feel like these descriptions on the apps are like a bunch of adjectives describing similar to what you're saying, not a lot of storytelling, and everything's become so superficial, and these filters that people think are going to help them achieve their goals are not the right filters. The height, the weight, all the other things that you mentioned. And I'm wondering that if like, I just don't know that the apps are the answer anymore. And I feel that they were very helpful and very useful for a long time. And now I think that it's just created a lot of bad habits with people. And they have lost that touch of having that in real life um, interactions of approaching, which kind of leads me to this other topic. And I mean, unless you want to comment something on the apps, I want to really talk about men for a minute. But what are your thoughts about the apps? Do you think that this is still the way to go, or?
I think that there is benefit to being able to date more efficiently, meaning that if you are a busy professional, you're not working with a matchmaker, that like on your lunch break, you do have the ability to potentially go through and find romantic candidates. I think it gives you access to more people, which again is also beneficial and can be efficient. However, to your point, it's a powerful tool that was put in the hands of millions of people, and no one was taught how to use it appropriately.
Mm,
So of course there's going to be accidents and misuse and abuse with the use of the tool.
yeah, I love that. Thank you for reframing that, because yes, it is a powerful tool, and in the right hands can be very good. It's the fact that a lot of people are not trained and they're just half-assing it, and therefore having half-ass results. So that is a great point. I don't want to poo-poo the apps, but at the same time, the fact that it's in all these hands, it's like, having a gun in the hands of someone who's not a good person is not going to be a good outcome.
Or a car, like,
Or
giving
cars.
we teach people how to drive. Could you imagine putting thousands of people in cars and not teaching them how to drive, and then allowing them all to drive at once and expecting it to not turn out disastrously?
I love it. I that just okay for the listeners. That's just a testament to how good you are as a coach, where you were able to make that very quick reframe, and I really appreciate that. I will use that going forward. I want to talk about what is happening to men, because in addition to being behind the screens in so many ways, playing games, meeting people on games, being online, and just a lot of the screens. I think, again, powerful tool to your point, really great in some cases, but I think things are going to an extreme. And I feel like and I talk about this almost at every episode. It's ridiculous because it's top of mind for me. Like, I'm just worried about the men. I love men. I want men to be successful. I have a grandson. And I'm finding that there's a big challenge between men and women today and connecting in the heteronormative conversation. What are your thoughts about, like, are you coaching men who are struggling in relationships and stuff?
I work with a lot of heterosexual male clients. Actually, most of my clients are heterosexual men and heterosexual women, and I find that they're having similar challenges, but for different reasons.
Mm,
I just talked to one of my male clients earlier today, and we were talking about gestures of chivalry and how a lot of women like certain gestures to demonstrate chivalry. And some of the suggestions that I made him, he's like, wow, that's really old school. He's like, you think that they really, they still like that? That's not too corny or cheesy? And I'm like, no. I was like, women love old school chivalry. It's one of the top things I hear from most women is even women who are more progressive and maybe left leaning or liberal, they still tell me that they value traditional chivalrous gestures. They don't want the man to assume they need it or tell them what they need and don't need, but they still like it.
hmm. I would have to agree with that. I'll tell you, like, even today I was talking to, I forget who, maybe it was my daughter, and I was saying, my husband grew up, he's the youngest of seven, and he had all older sisters. And maybe they were like sporty kind of tomboy. And I mean, I was a tomboy too growing up. And I feel like he missed a little bit of the training on how to treat women, like, not how to trick, because he's a great husband and everything, but sometimes if I'm jumping off this cliff here, can you just put out your hand and help me? Just the gestures, not that I can't do it for myself. I was the girl out there with hanging out with the boys in New York, jumping from roof to roof, like I was a total tomboy, and I played basketball and all this. But that's not what I want anymore. I want my husband to be chivalrous, to your point. And sometimes it slips, for him, because I think I really believe it's because he grew up with older sisters who were, bossing him around or whatever. Who knows? But I agree with you. And as a woman, I would agree. Yeah, please open the door. Sometimes I'm walking into a space and a gentleman will stand there and open the door, and often people just like slam the door in your face. They don't give a shit. A guy, let's say, you're walking right behind him and he'll just let the door go. And I'm like, what the hell? But see, I would do it too. Like if I have an older person, or even if it's a guy, like I would be chivalrous myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you. I think that's a really great point.
It's in what I find that a lot of men are struggling with is finding their place in this new power dynamic that women have. So, women are in a seat of ideally where they should be an equal power to men. And I mean that was the whole purpose of feminism, is women being treated as equals. And so I find that men sometimes struggle with this mindset, and how do they interact with women while still allowing them to maintain their independence and their autonomy and treating them as equals, while also still behaving in a very traditional way. So I don't default them for trying to navigate these waters and understand. I also think women, one of the terms that I've heard from a few of my male clients, I want to preface by saying this is not me saying this. This is a phrase that I've heard from several of my heterosexual male clients, is entitled feminism.
Mm,
And it's this idea that women should be treated as equals, have the same rights as men, the same power as men, but then they should also be given the privileges of a woman from a very traditional perspective. And an example of this is maybe a woman is making more money than a man or equal money to a man, but still expecting him to pay the bulk of the bills.
mm,
Is that fair, or is that entitlement? It's not equal for sure. and which is what feminism was about equality. But then you tie in this idea of chivalry, where a woman's like, I make X amount of money. Yes, and I work with a lot of successful women. So this is a conversation I have a lot. They make a lot of money. They're highly successful. Yet they still want the man to pay for their dinners, or they're, flying somewhere, to pay for the airfare, the hotel, the lodging. Again, these kind of these more traditional gestures in dating and relationships. And then I hear men saying, well, is that fair if she's making as much or more money than I am?
And what is your thought on that? Like, I mean, for me, I was married for almost 17 years where I was the breadwinner and my husband was he stayed at home for the most part. So I'm not one of those women. I can't even relate. By the same token, yes, I had relationships where I dated and the guy would pick up the tab. I always felt like I had to reciprocate, like at the very least, invite him over for dinner and cook for him or something. Like I guess because I'm not a taker, so I always felt like, in fact, I'm not even a good receiver. I've gotten better, but like I always felt that if somebody did something for me, I would have to do two or three things back, which was almost ridiculous. And maybe that was a problem with worthiness, because when you don't feel like you can receive, maybe you don't feel worthy. Not to psychoanalyze myself, but so I've come to terms with that, and I've shifted and I've become more balanced about it. But what's your opinion? What do you think is the right thing?
Well, what I will also say on this note is that men struggle with this too. Like, some men, it's not that they're intimidated by a woman's wealth or her success necessarily. It's more that they can't reconcile this idea. And even if they don't quite realize it, it's like what I hear them articulating to me is that they struggle with this idea of knowing that a woman might make more money than them, or equal money to them. And then they're still paying the bulk of bills, and they struggle with that idea. And so it makes them feel uncomfortable because they want to be the providers, they want to be the protectors, but then they have to reconcile, well, I'm the main provider here, yet she's making more money than I am. And they also don't feel good with that idea, which this is, from a sociological perspective, men tend to date with the approach of hypogamy, which is dating down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, meaning that they usually date women who are less successful than them, maybe less educated than them, even from a physical perspective, smaller, weaker, because then it puts them in a more traditional
Mm-hmm.
role. So I think that these are all new elements that we're navigating. I think that it can be navigated. Now, what I will say, like when working for a couples counseling practice, one of the tools that was recommended was that couples create a joint account. Now, of course, this wouldn't play into the courtship. This is more for the relationship, but they create a shared account. They can keep their own separate accounts, but then they create a joint couples account. And this couples account is what is used for date nights, for travel. Maybe they even have another account for living expenses, and they prorate the contributions to it. So whoever makes, they're each contributing 10% per month of
Mm-hmm.
whatever they make. And so that's fair. That's equal, and it's equitable. And those are the funds that are used for those specific things. And then if a woman likes the man to be the one who's paying for dinner, well, he can still pull out that card from that joint account for the date nights, and it's still perceived as a chivalrous gesture. Now, I know some women struggle with that. And again, I feel like this is where we go into that territory of maybe entitled feminism, where men are like, well, if she's making more money than me, why am I paying for everything? Why can't we create a joint account and I'm just using the joint account to pay for it? I'll say that having joint accounts, statistically, does help the overall satisfaction of a relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, unfortunately, you can't do that when you're dating, right? And it's funny how you mentioned that the men date down, the women date up, because this is how we've been socialized, where you feel that, that person, you're equal. If I'm a woman talking about my equal, he's going to be doing as well, if not better. And and that's just the way, I don't know if this, well, I guess it's evolutionary psychology, in addition to, you know, the fact that our society has changed so much. And yet our, the way we think and the way we're socialized has not caught up with that. Like, society is changing constantly, and women are controlling money more so. They're more educated. There's a lot going on right now that is shifting. I keep calling it the big shift, but we're not keeping up with that shift. And I think that's what's causing all this chaos worldwide.
Right. I agree. And it doesn't mean that it's negative or that it's bad. It just requires adaptation
Mm.
and growth. And oftentimes, this is unfortunate, but change doesn't happen until older generations die off, because then younger generations are adopting new ideologies, and it's just part of their psychology growing up, and so it's not unusual or abnormal to them. And so as they grow up, it's just normal. It's part of who they are. They're not having to try to completely rearrange their psychology around this new ideology.
It's so interesting how, in this industry, I've been in it for, I think, over 15 years at this point, and I just find that it's constantly changing. That nothing stays the same. I know people think that, oh my gosh, I became a matchmaker. I'm a dating coach. That's it. No, you better keep learning and you better keep up with everything because it's constantly changing, and the approach has to change to
Yes.
go along with it.
That's the intro that I have to every coaching client. I tell them that the modern courtship is constantly evolving based off of socio political and technological advances. And so, part of what I've done as a psychological researcher, even over the last few years, is research the modern courtship. I've done focus groups on men and women to try to have an understanding of how they perceive the modern courtship, and I've compared the two on how men and women perceive the modern courtship, how men amongst men perceive it, and the women amongst women perceive it. I've done surveys, and I'm constantly taking notes through case studies to try to understand what's happening in the modern courtship. How is it changing?
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes you a great coach is that you're, always learning. And I feel like we have that in common among many other things. um, you brought up technology, and I think it's a great segue to talk a little bit about that because aside from the online dating space, we now have AI, we have these bots. In fact, the FTC just brought up a charge against some organization I can't think of off the top of my head because they had these bots that were somewhat emulating a human connection and experience. And there was a concern that maybe children were being fooled into thinking that they were communicating with a human.
Mm.
And I'm right off the top of my head, I can't think of what the company was, but the Federal Trade Commission just shut those people down. But this is going to be more and more of a thing. I haven't been on an online platform as a online dating in years. So, but I hear constantly that there are bots on these apps and that people are just really frustrated. And so, what are your thoughts about what's happening right now with technology and relationships and people, living through this loneliness epidemic and then now turning to technology?
Well, one thing that is already here now, it hasn't caught on in popularity yet, but it's already here. Like AI boyfriends and girlfriends. So people can actually create their an AI boyfriend or girlfriend for them and engage with it on their phone as if it's like a real person. Um, so I think that's wild. And I think to your point, it's one way that people are coping with loneliness. And AI can be so realistic, and to a certain degree, it kind of does have like a mind of its own. And so I think that's wild. I don't know whether that's good or bad. I would want to see some research on, is this truly helping people with loneliness, or is this exacerbating the issue? Is this preventing people from seeking true companionship? I think that would be problematic as well. Or maybe it's motivational. Maybe it's like, you know what, I really am craving this connection, and this has helped me realize how important it is. And so I'm going to go out and find the real thing. I don't know yet. There's not a lot of data on it to understand how it's really impacting the psychology of people. Um, Another aspect of where AI is entering the world is even with porn. Now they have AI porn where people can create AI porn stars and live out their AI fantasies, which I think is also really problematic. As we know, porn creates a lot of addiction. It causes a lot of strife and negativity, not only in a person's life as an individual, but in their dating life and also in their relationship life. And so now they're adding this new element in there.
Hmm.
I think it could be problematic.
And let's not even talk about the low birth rate that already exists. It's only going to get worse if people are now having relationships with robots, Ugh.
Yes. And again, this is a powerful tool. Like, it's the same way as looking at dating apps. It is a powerful tool that has been put into the hands of thousands of people, but no one is being taught how to use it appropriately. I've even seen people who are putting like AI photos on their dating apps, which now, do I think that this is wrong? Not necessarily, not if the photos are representative of what the person actually looks like. Some AI tools are very good at accuracy, and it is an accurate representation of what the person looks like. Now, I think that they shouldn't only be AI photos. They should have a mix of maybe some real photos, maybe some AI photos. I had a client who was sending me some dating profiles of women, because I asked my clients sometimes to send me photos or profiles of people that they're interested in, and maybe I'll reach out to them on their behalf and vet them, or just get a better idea of what they're attracted to. And he sent me some profiles, and I'm like, AI photo, AI photo, AI photo, and he couldn't tell. Like,
Wow.
he did not know. He's like, I'll have to trust your judgment on that. And then I was like pointing out to him, I'm like, here's how you can kind of like things that you can look for to help identify if it's an AI photo or not. However, a lot of the profiles he sent me, they also had peppered in some real photos too. And I'm like, this is a real photo. This is an AI photo. So if you're basing, using the photos to help determine whether or not you're going to reach out to her, look at these photos, not these photos, as your determinant.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what are your thoughts about social media? Because I feel like that, again, powerful tool, very helpful to keep up with, what's going on in people's lives if you don't talk to them on a regular basis. Part of why I got on Facebook was when my nephew was in the military. That was the only way we knew that he was okay. And now it's just like people break up over finding out that someone's getting DMs and they're responding to them, or they're liking women's photos and all kinds of stuff. Like, it's bonkers what's going on with social media. And at the same time, I hear people meet their spouses that way too.
Right. I think social media is a better tool for online dating than the online dating apps
Mm,
themselves. Um,
okay.
Mainly because you get a better idea of who the person is on their social media. They're usually posting more raw, unfiltered content, or they have the ability to reshare posts, or put in their thoughts. You can get an idea of like what their religious affiliations are, political affiliations, how they view the world. Social media does a good job at giving us a preview into someone's mind and psychology. So I think it's more advantageous than the dating apps themselves. And I know some dating apps like Hinge allow you to attach and connect your Instagram accounts if you want. A lot of people don't do that, but if they do have an Instagram account and they're using Hinge or one of the apps that have that feature, I think they should do that. I do think that there's a lot of benefit to that. But to your point, in the introduction, the advent of social media and online dating and these other features like AI boyfriends and girlfriends, AI porn, etc., online porn, has really changed how people need to have conversations around monogamy.
Mm,
So everyone assumes, from my experience, people assume that their perception of monogamy is the same as everybody else's. And people don't have this conversation soon enough about what is monogamy to me, what is monogamy to you, and let's create, if we're going to be in a relationship, an exclusive relationship, let's create a monogamy agreement.
mm,
And oftentimes they wait until something happens, and sometimes that damage can be irreparable. And to your point, social media, is it cheating if someone you're in a relationship with is liking or commenting a half naked photo of somebody else? Some people would say yes, some people would say no. If somebody comments on their picture and it's a flirty comment and they heart it, is that flirting? Is that inviting the person to engage with them further, especially if it was a flirty message? If somebody is watching porn online, is that cheating? I had one client where she perceived watching porn as cheating, because in her mind, it's the man fantasizing about another woman, and that is sexual energy that he could be saving up for their relationship and their interactions. Or a lot of these porn sites now have chat rooms, right? And they advertise it. So then is it cheating if, let's say, someone doesn't think porn is cheating? Is it then cheating if they're chatting with someone that doesn't live near them? They could live across the world, and they're not creating an emotional attachment. They're not exchanging names. They're just engaging in sexual acts over the video. Is that cheating if no physical intimacy, if no physical connection actually happens? For some, no. For some, yes. Like there's now enter AI. If somebody is using AI porn, it's not even a real person. It's an artificial intelligence. Like, is that avatar? Is that cheating? If you're watching porn of a fictitious human being, I mean, there's a lot of nuances now that people need to navigate when talking about monogamy.
What I love about that is it all kind of sums up to communication and being intentional, which you talked about as well, and having a conversation about what is monogamy, what is it not. I think it's super important. You know, this conversation has been very rich as always with you. But before we close, what's one piece of advice you give matchmakers or dating professionals who want to apply psychology more intentionally in their work starting today? Like, what can they do to be better at this and to be able to serve their clients better?
One thing is take your favorite book, like your favorite self-help book, your favorite book on relationships, and look at the sources. Like, is this book based off of actual scientific research? If not, throw it in the trash. And if it is, then look up those sources and look up the original studies. Because oftentimes what happens with these self-help books and these relationship books is this is the author's interpretation of this data, which might be insightful, might be accurate, might be applicable, might not. It's their interpretation. So instead of just regurgitating somebody else's ideas, look at the original research that they're gathering these insights from to, one, see, do my insights align with this person's based off of the same data? If not, come up with something new and write your own book. And also, it can give them even more insight into understanding the principles that this person is discussing. And it'll make them seem more credible, because then they'll understand, like, when they're communicating to their clients, where this information is actually coming from and how it has been validated, proved, or disproved.
I love that. I mean, this is why you and I are so aligned. I'm very science and research based, and I love everything you just shared about that. And also, when you're looking at these studies, make sure that if they're talking to a bunch of 25-year-olds and you're coaching a 60-year-old, that you understand that there's a huge difference there in priorities. That's why this area is never ending, the amount of education that you can get, and the fact that everything's shifting and evolving. So I everything you shared, as always. I knew, this would be a phenomenal conversation. And, for those of you who are listening and who want to go deeper, be sure to check out Brandon's Love Attraction Journal, because you can find it everywhere on a website, on Amazon. And don't forget to follow him on Instagram, because Brandon shares a lot of great content. Brandan Rader Official on Instagram, and on TikTok. I just started liking people on TikTok. I think I'm going to start doing TikTok. So check him out at Psyched About You on TikTok. I think I'll be joining you there now that I think things are going to be okay in the US with TikTok. And of course, we're going to link everything in the show notes. And Brandan, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited that you were able to get on this show because you and I used to do our weekly shows and we haven't done that. I miss you so much. But this conversation, I think, has been very powerful for anyone who's an aspiring matchmaker, a matchmaker now, a dating coach, and someone who is a dating coach who hasn't been trained. Listening to this, I think, will incentivize a lot of people to say, you know what? Let me start looking at the data and the research and really be careful with the information you share if you don't know if it's accurate because people are already struggling. They don't need more misinformation. And I think that's key.
Yes, well, thank you for having me as always. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. And remember, whether you're guiding clients through their matchmaking journey or navigating your own, success starts with mindset and intention. Until next time, I'm Arlene Washburn, and this is the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast. Thank you for joining.
Have you ever felt called to help others find love? You might have the heart for matchmaking, but without the right training, turning that passion into a thriving business can feel impossible. Most matchmaking courses give you outdated theories and a certificate, but no real world strategy to build a successful business. That's where Love Pro Mastermind Academy is different. Our live Done With You training goes beyond theory, helping you develop matchmaking expertise, implement sales and marketing strategies, and master the art of client success. With expert-led instruction, accountability, and a community of like-minded professionals, you'll learn how to identify your niche, attract high-quality clients, create a seamless matchmaking process, grow a sustainable, profitable business. With over a decade of experience, we don't just train matchmakers, we create leaders in the industry. Are you ready to become an LPMA certified matchmaker and build a business that changes lives? Apply today at lovepromastermind.com.
Thank you for tuning in to the Matchmaker Mentor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow matchmakers and friends. For more resources, training, and inspiration, visit lovepromastermind.com and follow us on social media. Remember, matchmaking isn't just a career, it's a calling. Let's keep building connections, changing lives, and growing together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep matching.